good morning or good afternoon, everybody. It's so nice to see so many faces and to connect with you all. So my name is Jesse Dame. I am very proudly Two-Spirit and Métis. My family is originally from Treaty 1 and Treaty 2 territory, which we now know as Winnipeg and St. Rose de Lac in Manitoba. But I was born and raised on Stolo territory and currently calling in among the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo First Nations in what we know colonially as White Rock or South Surrey. I am very fortunate to wear many beautiful hats within the realms of Two-Spirit and queer and trans Indigenous folks. I get to walk along many of my Two-Spirit kin and have strong connections within the community. And I'm very thankful for being able to work with and for the Two-Spirit community. I am a certified registered nurse by trade, I guess. My background is in the NICU as well as in sexual health. And now I wear two main hats as a Two-Spirit program manager, as well as an Indigenous gender and sexual health lead. So everything I do, majority of my work is around sex and gender, really pushing in opening up dialogue around the binary, the forced binary, and I truly believe we can't really even talk about decolonization or really talk about reconciliation without sex and gender really being deeply rooted in this work, because the binary, the limitations, the challenge to the matriarchy, many of these things came in as well with colonization, and we really need to think and I believe we really need to think and reflect about sex and gender and how that influences many of the things that we do. And a big part of that, which I'll explain quickly through is in plain sight. So though I am very, very thankful for that report coming out, which really validated many folks' experiences throughout the province of BC within the Two-Spirit community, and a critique from the Two-Spirit community is that unfortunately there was a complete erasure of Two-Spirit and LGBTQ folks in the report. And I'll give you a little bit of a backstory of how that kind of came to be, and now the conversation's happening. So when the first request came out for experiences and stories that would then become in plain sight came out a couple years ago now, and that's when I was newly in my role as the Two-Spirit program manager at CBRC, and I found out and realized that we needed to have a good large Two-Spirit LGBTQ presence within these reports to really capture the intersectionality of sex and gender and indigeneity. Because if you look back in a lot of the reports, Two-Spirit can be found in the titles, but if you're actually reading through the articles or the research, unfortunately, a lot of the times we get a sentence at the end saying we need more research for Two-Spirit community, or we're completely absorbed into the LGBTQ acronym, which results in again, a lack of awareness or the lack of beauty in the intersecting concepts of sex and gender and indigeneity and the histories of sex and gender in Indigenous communities, as well as the new changes of the Two-Spirit community that are coming to be now. So at that time, we did a pretty good campaign. I was interviewed on CBC and APTN and a number of things to have conversations with Two-Spirit folks and Two-Spirit queer and trans Indigenous folks to recruit them to submit their stories and their experiences of Indigenous specific racism, but also deeply rooted in homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, or other forms of discrimination, which was a successful campaign. I knew when we found out that hundreds of people submitted their stories. Fast forward to the first report of In Plain Sight coming out with zero mention of Two-Spirit LGBTQ folks within that report. And then when the secondary data report came out, there was a singular sentence that actually reported Two-Spirit queer and trans Indigenous folks experience better healthcare interactions than Indigenous women and Indigenous men, which actually is extremely complicated, but also contradictory of majority of the current research out there right now. And there was no context. So really this topic we bring up today is to have folks start to think and unpack some of these conversations about sex and gender and the intersections within indigeneity, but also the complexities or the erasure that continues to happen for Two-Spirit queer and trans folks, and the context, which is the most important part, is the context. So we found out, so after seeing that singular sentence that we got in the data report, I was quite frustrated. A lot of folks who submitted their stories were quite frustrated. So we actually ended up submitting a letter to the In Plain Sight team, the folks that did a lot of the work, and found out that just under 9% of the respondents, or just under 300 people, identified within the Two-Spirit queer and trans Indigenous spectrum. And unfortunately, to the folks that did the analysis, that number was too small. I account for less than 0.2% of the population. So a 9% respondent rate is like one of the biggest respondent rates I've ever seen. And this is where data analysis and understandings the complexities really come into play. That number was actually a huge, beautiful overrepresentation and potentially a lot of rich data that we have no longer have access to or can even really see. So we had some conversations with the Ministry of Health and some other folks about how can we fix this, or like Jordan said when she introduced me, find this missing chapter is what we've kind of coined it, because there was a huge chunk of information left out. A 9% respondent rate, that's hundreds of Two-Spirit folks that shared their stories and didn't get their experiences captured, and that's through. And in my reflection is like there was concerns about confidentiality and concerns about different things, and that's when some of those tools, in my opinion, though they're made to protect people, they're actually a tool of colonization that actually silence or erase community groups because we're so small. But we're so small because of colonization, homophobia, and discrimination, right? So it's like that cycle that we're talking about, or that cycle that you can see, is that we're too small to be heard, but we're so small because we're not heard. So then we're silenced again, and it's this intersecting continuous issue that we're seeing in the complete erasure that continues to happen in a lot of research. So that was the concern or the conversation that we're having. So thankfully, the Ministry of Health and some of the folks within the Ministry have heard us, have had some great conversations, and we're working with many different folks, some of the beautiful folks on the call, to really look into and lean into that missing chapter and dive deeper into sex and gender and how it relates to a lot of our work within healthcare, as well as within general society, or when we're talking about decolonization or reconciliation, and how we can really push back against some of these forced binaries, some of these forced molds that society really likes to put us into. And then the second we don't want to conform into that mold is when folks start to panic a little bit and don't know where to put us, which is the point, which is my favorite part, the ambiguity and the complexity. But as we know, healthcare and other things don't really like the no definition part. And as a nurse, it was a shift in my thinking, but a real connection to my heritage as a Métis person, but also to many of my First Nations family or kin, to really talk about the connection of sex and gender that is deeply rooted in our histories and the stories and teachings that come with that. So really the goal of me being here today was just to share that little experience that I had with In Plain Sight that unfortunately is a perfect example of what continuously happens. And we do see it unfortunately a lot. So this is a situation that we've identified, that we're having great conversations with now, and that we're growing from. And it's just the area that I really urge for all of us in the call and folks who work in different areas of research to lean into or reflect on. And I'm always happy to have more conversations after today and really dive deeper if folks are interested. But I can pass it back to you, Jordan, or unless anybody has any questions, I'm also happy for questions.